YouTube because I don't trust YouTube. It says you're connected and then you're not. You're speaking like an idiot for 15 minutes. And then
should I speak like an idiot for 15 minutes? I'd be happy to do that.
It should be okay. And refreshing. And we're in. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, depending on the time on the day you're watching this. As you know, I call this the time traveling show because here it's 5 p.m. For Anne, it's 11 a.m. So we're moving time. And what just my public service announcement of the day, as usual. Wear your fucking mask.
Oh, no.
Not you, Annie. Not you. You're fine. You're fine.
So
I knew you had it.
I'm all alone here, but...
All of you, remember, the mask is not meant for you. It's to protect others from you. That's why we use the mask. To protect the people we love. To protect our elders, to protect the kids. And if anybody tells you the kids cannot get COVID-19, that's a lie. They can get it and they can die. And also don't be an idiot, I haven't seen my friend in 6 months. So I'm just going to go, no mask, hug her and kiss her, hug him and kiss him. And then you can kill him or her. And the second thing, there's not only death, something called chronic illnesses. There's people who suffer COVID that has been suffering that for the last 6 months. In their lungs, in their brain, in their arms or legs. So please don't do it. And last but not least, if you think your freedom is too important and you don't want to wear a mask because you are more important than the people we should all take care of, leave this fucking channel now. I don't want you here. With that said, hello, Annie. How's things? How are you?
I don't know. All my friends just left the channel.
Oops. I'm sorry.
Teasing.
How's things? How's things in your neck of the woods? The things have changed for the better? The numbers, or they're going still bad?
No. I mean, it's a more contemplative time of life, I guess. Everybody's thinking like, do I really love my partner? Do I hate my kids? Do I hate myself? What's going on here? So no, I'm very lucky. I'm in a cabin in the woods. It's snowing. It's beautiful. So I'm working. So I'm happy.
Mm-hmm. Imagine I'm your doctor. My name just changed. I'm now Victor Frankenstein. This is my syringe. I pop it into you and say, pandemic is over. We're free. What's the first thing that you've been dying to do for months? And you say, the first thing I'm going to do as soon as I have my vaccine, and it's guaranteed that it's safe to go out, what would it be?
Well, I think that, and I'm speaking maybe for some other comic book people. I mean, we work hard and we're kind of loners anyway. So it's sort of, I've been freelance for a decade. So I went from spending a lot of time working to spending a lot of time working. I mean, the biggest thing for me was I was supposed to, when the pandemic hit, I was supposed to start a little book promotion tour for Ruby Falls, which started with me, Karen Berger, and Flavia Biondi meeting in Naples, Italy. And I was so excited to meet her because we had been working for a year together, producing these 4 issues for Ruby Falls, all by email, because my Italian isn't good. Her English isn't good. So it was by email. And so I just wanted to hug her, I just wanted to, Karen and we were going to, explore Naples with Flavia, and it was for Napoli Con. And so that was the first thing that was canceled. And that was really, really sad. But then the next thing that happened was there was a sense that with Black Lives Matter, the civil unrest here, with the pandemic hitting, that you didn't want to suck the oxygen out of the social media space for more important things. So we just didn't do any press at all. We just said, we can't do this, so that was sad. And then I also, I'm one of the writers and producers of the Marvel Museum, and we were opening in Detroit, and that opening was canceled. So I had a bunch of travel planned that fell apart, obviously. So we're like soldiers in a war. We're all doing our part, and it's not that hard. All you have to do is stay home and wear a mask. It's not like I have to slog through the mud with a big pack on my back, hoping I don't get shot. I mean, this is kind of an easy war to win if we just stay home.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you noticed that you're overworking with all of this, or the other way around? That
no, the other way around.
Difficult to concentrate.
So I have this, hand-built cabin. You can see behind me. It's just like it's this hand-built thing that that I built with my partner, and I never really spent much time here because I was always traveling, and mostly I'm in New York City. So I came up here when the pandemic hit. I was in New Orleans. I was in New Orleans at Mardi Gras. Not that I like Mardi Gras, but I was there to visit friends. And this was like, and there was a crew that went by this is February, and they're all yellow, and they say "Go Viral" on them, and it was a coronavirus crew. New Orleans is nuts, so the crew is like a group with a costume. And I was just like, what is this coronavirus go viral stuff? That's in Wuhan. And it was sort of like, wait a minute. And then by the time I took the plane back to New York, early March, it was, we were almost to lockdown. So I came up here, and I have noticed that I'm avoiding writing. Like I'm doing anything outside, swimming, hiking, working on the land, anything other than write, which is not good, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah. But let me turn that question around. Why, after so many years, you decided to come back to comics? To do Ruby Falls, to do the series?
Yeah. I think that I love comics. There's things you can do in comics. They're intimate. They're it's so much fun to balance and perfect each panel, each page, each sequence. I mean, it's a beautiful art. I don't have to tell you that, but it's a fascinating process. And Ruby Falls just came from a little incident, it's just an idea sparked, and the thing flowed out. And also it's the relationship with the artist. Flavia Biondi draws with such love and tenderness. And she's real body language, and she just captured each character, their mannerisms, how they stood, what they did with their hands. She's a lot of like, the folding of the arms, if you want to like say arm closed down, a lot of actorly tricks. She puts a lot of stuff that actors do into the comic characters. And then I tend to write scripts with a lot of B-roll because I made films for a long time. And so I'm always like collecting shots and say, here's the characters, but then cut away and show this and this and this and this. So, the story is essentially about the old-fashioned idea of a fallen woman. What's a fallen woman? What does that mean to be a fallen woman? And so we came up with this idea that even though it's a noir kind of, and so it should have aspects of a noir, like even the cliches and tropes of interiors, the exteriors would always have falling leaves. There would always be a sense of something falling. And that seems like a really simplistic visual layer to put on a comic, but it became like a constant subliminal. I'm really into foreshadowing subliminals in order that the climaxes, if you want to call them, the point of the comic, has a power that is building. That so that like in the Seeds, there were a lot of shots of bees just moving and bees going underground and bees following Lola, and it was just sort of so that when you get to a reveal as to something the bees are up to, you go, oh yeah, because you stirred foreshadowing in the subliminals, and it hits in that moment. So that's it's like that's the art, the fun. It's the fun of it. And here I'll show you, like Ruby Falls. It's got and I don't know how to do this there.
Yes,
There's
perfect.
the noir pages are quite different from the and there was a whole, Flavia came up with a whole color motif for the grandmother in the caves. I don't know if you've seen this book, but it's gorgeous. I don't know how to present it well.
No. You're doing fine. We can see it. Just move it to your left. There you go.
There's always things falling. So here it's just like she has a bunch of photos that she's kind of stolen from a library of crime scene photos, and they're falling. So there was always a sense of, let's just keep having things fall. And there, of course, is Ruby, and she's the fallen woman. So that was a lot of fun. And I can't really explain, but every page that came back from Flavia was so embraced in love. I can't really explain it. I was dying to meet her because she's got to be the most loving girl. And and then she put a lot of her life into it. Flavia's gay, and so the main character is gay. I mean, that was a decision once Karen, I think it was Jeff Lemire, recommended her to Karen, and Karen said, what about Flavia? And I just decided I have to make this comic about her. Why would she want to draw something if she can't put her own life into it? And so the relationship with her partner in the comic is so beautiful, even though they keep having problems. Lana, Lana character, she cheats on her with a man, and it's but all this stuff is very never commented about. It's in the plot, but there's not much commentary because we wanted to do a gay, even polyamorous, I guess you'd call it, relationship without it being like a big deal. We wanted to normalize it. Yeah. So and Karen was really into just this three female generations. It's about a young girl, her mother, and a grandmother, and a crime that was committed in the town a long time ago. And when you go to dig up a small town crime, the town doesn't like it, and you have like literary things going back to like Winesburg, Ohio, and Sherman Anderson, all the way to like David Velvet, where you have like that feeling of something's wrong in suburbia. Suburbia is a construct. There's something wrong there. There's something creepy. I'll never forget that shot in Blue Velvet where the firemen are going by and there's a white picket fence and the firemen are waving, and then David Lynch takes the camera down, and there are the ants in the leaves saying, and so that's kind of how I like to think with comics, is very filmic, I guess.
And that's something that takes me to another question, which is how important it is for you, because you mentioned the leaves falling and all that. How important is for you to use pattern recognition?
What do you mean by that?
Pattern recognition. I always say the same example. We're in the caves here. Hi, hello, caveman here.
Caveman. So I'm the caveman. I don't know.
I am the caveman. I am the caveman, not you. So the caveman, you hear a bush rustling, and of course the cavemen, the moment they heard that, they thought there's an animal there, it's going to kill me. So and they run away. That's pattern recognition. Is you don't need to see things.
Yes. Yeah.
To understand them, that. What I mean is you're talking about that. Is the things that, as I always say, you don't need to see Batman. if you see, this shape of the ear and the cowl, automatically you know that's Batman.
No, of course. Yeah, no, I guess I was, yeah, no, absolutely. Now I know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for teaching me that.
No.
I think I just don't use that phrase. We don't, I made comics. Then I switched to journalism for a long time, and then I switched to film for a long time. So maybe some of my language comes from journalism and film rather than comics. So, in film, it becomes instinctual.
Yeah,
it just becomes very. But that's the artist domain for me. I mean, I put a lot of shots, and I put camera direction, I put angles, I put, here, why don't we look up at the characters so they look important? Let's center them so they look important. Let's put them in the center of the page or let's, shoot from this way so they look diminished or scared or whatever. And how about we cut to the snow falling because they're feeling lyrical? How about we cut to a strange sound in the distance because they're paranoid, So I put a lot of that in the comic with a line at the top that says, do whatever you want. So the artist can, and I tend to write 3 to 4 panel pages and add more panels, add more panels, combine panels, shove everything into a couple pages if you want to do a double page spread. And I send a big file of photo reference for every page that I think isn't obvious, like unless the chair in the story is a really important chair and it has to be the Queen's chair, and then I'll send a pile of reference. But for the most part, it's like a chair is a chair is a chair, rose is a rose. And it's so, but I make it clear with the very first line in the script, take what you want, do whatever you want. You're the storyteller, so most artists stick to the script. Most artists pretty much break down and stick to the script, and most artists like to stay on the character because it's point of view. And so I'm speaking more about my experience, which is mostly superhero comics and superheroes, the prominence of the superhero and usually the alter ego, be it Matt Murdock or whoever, is, and it's very subjective point of view. So unless you make a specific thing to the artist saying, Daredevil doesn't know who he is right now, so let's use the omnipotent point of view but normally they will stay in the skin of, it's very actorly, the way superheroes are drawn. It's like, let's stay in the skin of this character. So, for Ruby Falls and the Seeds, they were both ensemble pieces. And especially for the Seeds, I wanted 3 point of views, which is not easy. I wanted the point of view because you have climate. So I wanted not God's eye view, but whatever eye view that was, this planet is dying. And then I wanted the animals' point of view. So there's a lot of cutaways to animals watching humans, animals watch ants, because to me in that comic, because it is the I don't know, there's a strong feeling of the earth is dying and we got to do something in the comics. So a lot of animals are just sort of looking at humans like, what are you up to? Are you really going to kill and eat me? Do you really not notice that stuff that's falling is toxic? So there were a lot of shots where it was like, cut to birds, cut to pig, cut to goat. And then, I tossed all that stuff at David. And then David does his magic, which is, he takes the shots, he juggles them all over the place. And one of the things what he did, I slowly started to obviously learn from him. And I started to notice that in the 9-panel grid, he'll put his centerpiece. I don't know. Do you play chess?
Yes.
You know how when you play chess, it's the 4 center squares that you kind of have to dominate. And he was doing a thing in comics with the grid that was very much to me. I was like, oh, that's like when I play chess. You know,
Mhm.
this square is really important in the center of the 9-panel grid. And sometimes it would be as simple as a shot of a tree. And I'd be like, why is he putting the tree there? And then, of course, you'd see that every line on the page had like the branches and the, you know, he was telling many stories with each page. He was
Mhm.
telling subliminal stories. He was telling just balance and design stories. And he was telling these stories. So that was a very exciting process. As with Flavia, the art, what the artist is, that's maybe, you know, other than getting the story you're trying to tell out, it's really, really fun to see what the artist does.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
No, no, no. I was gonna say that uh, about pattern recognition and all that. It's not comic terms. I always mix science terms and then put them into comic
Yeah,
language and,
I like
and movies
that.
and all that, because I think, as I always say, in the old days, the schools, you know, were called arts and sciences. Many
Yes.
people tries to separate them, and I always say, no, no, it's the same. It's two sides of the same coin. Music is math. In the way music is math, and comics, the comics language. And this is my question for you: this comics storytelling feels. I said feel, not in your brain, your heart.
Feel.
Feels more like a symphony, rock and roll, or jazz.
It depends on the comic, you know. I mean, it really depends on the comic.
Mhm.
You know, if you look at Japanese comics, if you look at something like Lone Wolf and Cub, where they amazing. I mean, all American comic artists, we just drool over the idea that you could have like 1,000 panels to tell a story, 1,000 pages to tell a story. But if you flip through Lone Wolf and Cub, it feels kind of operatic because it's just, you know, there'll be like a sweep of many pages of just someone running in the woods. We can't do that in American comics. I mean, in American comics, it's very it was very frustrating doing superhero comics. You had 22 pages, and there had to be some kind of action. You know, you could cut away to Matt, you know, doing some legal work. I'm just going to talk about Daredevil because that's the book I was on the longest. But you have to escalate to a climax, a big within 20 pages. That ain't easy. So I don't really even know. I don't even know how I would contextualize the musically the essentially cramped and contorted thing that a superhero comic is, you know. But I remember working with Chris Claremont. I mean, Chris was very operatic. I would say a lot of his comics were opera. In fact, he used to tell me that he played opera while he wrote. And you can feel like Walt Simonson. Those are operatic and Jack Kirby. So I don't know. It'd be hard to figure out who's rock and roll and jazz, but I've just given you a couple operatic guys.
No. It's not perfect. That's perfect.
I don't know. I don't know what I am.
No, for me, I always thought that, and I completely agree. It depends on the comic, but for me, superhero comics have always been pieces of a symphony, because you go up, you go down, you get the quiet moments, and then you get the horns and the drums, and which is the splash pages. So that's why I always thought about that. Operatic is an amazing word for it too, because they're very related, and that takes me back to what I said about the science that is for you as a writer, because you know that you have to have certain things, you know, first arc, second arc, third arc, even if it's a longer story in 22 pages, which is the most difficult part. I think you have to cram a story that has a resolution, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird that and I'll go back to terms I used. With Chris, I loved working with Chris on the X-Men, and because we had, you know, hundreds and hundreds of characters and multiple books going, you know, Chris used to have these little notebooks where he'd try and organize the whole thing, but it was singing in rounds. So, you know, when you sing in rounds, someone finishes the arc of that, and then someone else comes in with another, and you keep it rolling. So you're singing in rounds. So it's beginning, middle, end. But in the end, a new beginning comes midway, beginning, middle, end, but not linear like that. It's rolled on top of each other. So, and for Daredevil too, I'd be like, okay, so for this year, I want him to go from this point to this point within a year. So that's 12 stories. And then I want each 3-issue thing to have an arc. But back then in the 80s, we were very, very, very conscious of how we wanted single issue stories, even if it was part of an arc. And so Daredevil is, I would always try to do the series so that you could pick up any issue and read a complete story. Not really. You would be wondering what just happened and what's happening next. But at the same time, I mean, it's like a drug dealer. We were tricking kids into buying more and more comics. It was like you. So, and then things started to go kind of nuts with the X-Men because there were so many characters and so many storylines, and and then that began, I think, an arc of comics that really stopped caring about the single issue story. And one of the interesting things that relates to Seeds and Ruby Falls is that they were designed as 4 issues turned into a book, graphic novel, whatever. And so you do have to have a fresh opening, kind of reestablish the characters, kind of lead to something that is like a climax that isn't really a climax. And you had to have cliffhangers. Now, so for me, it was very weird when they were packaged into one story because it was like the rhythm's off. It's like, why are these 3 cliffhangers every 20, in the Seeds it's 28 pages, Ruby Falls why are these weird cliffhangers? And then you don't have the month break and pick up another one. You have this cliffhanger, normal, and so that was jarring to me. I think that maybe this type of comic book making is going to go straight graphic novel because there is something odd about the 4 issues being designed as single issues and then being glommed together and called a graphic novel, because they aren't really graphic novels because they weren't designed for that.
I guess that's the future in a way, right? I mean, this is like a step, like a first step, and when they realize we don't need to do the singles,
no,
we just need to go straight to that.
I love the singles, because the first single I got obsessed with was Walt Simonson's Thor. I had just started at Marvel. I didn't know much about comics, but I remember that wonderful anticipation for what's Walt going to do next, and that might have been mixed in with the fact that I was friends with him and Wheezy and I loved him, and he would bring teaser pages into my office, and but that feeling of anticipation. And in the 80s, we had the comics I was editing, like Bill Sienkiewicz's Mutants, and before that Moon Knight. Bill's work Frank Miller's work was exciting. There were so many exciting comics back then. Everything Karen Berger was doing out of Vertigo. I mean, I remember that we used to have Bundles Day, and bundles would arrive on your desk, and you'd get all the Distinguished Competitions comics. So you'd get your DC bundle, and I'd basically be ripping through looking for Karen's books. So I don't know. I love that. I love singles because I love the whole idea of, rolling them up and sticking them in your back pocket and reading them on the subway. And, graphic novels, they're very precious. And so I'm of 2 minds. Part of me would like to go back to some crappier form, like a broadsheet and, a fanzine, and just, have them come out and keep a mystery to it, the way will like drop an album on a surprise, So I don't know. I think it's wide open. I think it's a wide open thing. But in hindsight, I would have thought more about how do you put 4 singles into an album, doing the Seeds and the graphic and Ruby Falls, especially the Seeds, because of the pandemic, we couldn't do issues 3 and 4. You know, they were all done. They were done a year ago. David finished those in over a year ago. He finished 3 and 4, but the pandemic hit, and then you had the supply chain problems, comic book shops shut, and that added a whole year to our production schedule, and it became silly to put out 3, 4 graphic novel like all of a sudden. So you know, that was a dark horse decision.
And but you plan to keep writing, as you said, singles, right? Not just going to everything I want to do is going to be a straight graphic novel.
I mean, the project that I was working on when the pandemic hit, and it's really heartbreaking, is I spent a lot of time in Haiti teaching film in Haiti. I made a lot of films with my students. You know, I didn't make movies. I made them with my students, like 40 short films, you know, a lot of documentaries, a lot made after the earthquake hit. And so there were, everywhere you looked, there was a story. So, and, you know, I was living out of a tent, and, you know, it was very, it was like it was like a war zone. And we would just go out on motorcycles, these little motor taxis with all our equipment. And, you know, I ran it like a newsroom. My students would come in, pitch stories. I'd say, that sounds good. Let's go scope it out. And we had these they call them motor taxis. They're like little motorcycles. But we would just hop on them. Sometimes 2 or 3 of us on a motorcycle with no helmets. There's no helmet law. And while we're holding all this massive, you know, cameras and, you know, booms and everything, it was very, in hindsight, sometimes I thought of it like it was like a cartoon, you know, some kind of wacky cartoon where way too many people are piled on it and this thing's sticking all over. And we'd shoot off, and we'd basically, you know, do our master shot, do our main interviews. And a lot of what I was doing was teaching B-roll to the students. That was one of my obsessions. So I was always like pointing into puddles and saying, look at the reflection in the puddle, and she's sad. Let's try and get an angle where she's reflected in the puddle. And oh, there's that chicken scratching over there, and that guy is really nervous. Let's like I was always trying to get them to grab things to intercut into the story, to do that visual storyboarding, and which is a lot of that I put in the Seeds, which a lot of cutaway shots, then, you know, and then always just optional, kind of, because I hate dictating to the artist. So only when things were, I was like, whoa, the whole story falls apart if I don't have that shot, would I say, yeah, we kind of have to have that. But for the most part, you know, they do what they do. And so why am I talking about Haiti?
I was just asking if you're going to continue doing singles or going straight to graphic novels with your next projects.
So the reason Haiti is because it had a really profound impact on my life, and I've always wanted to do a comic set in Haiti. And I have this wonderful, one of my students I just love so much. She's become a really close friend, Kezia Jean, and she was visiting me in New York. I mean, my loft in New York was for many years kind of a crash pad for Haitians. They would all come and just, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it's like, you know, everybody would just sleep all over on the floor, and we'd cook, and we would talk film and play with cameras. And so I really wanted to bring Kezia, she has a great eye, into the comic field. Because I've reached a point in my life where I've told so many stories that I'm really into mentoring, and I'm really into, so I really wanted Kezia to make a comic, and we were going to do a comic set in Haiti, and we jammed on it. We did a pitch, we did a lookbook. In film, you have what's called a lookbook, which is like, and I do this in comics too. You just you just load up an artist with a lot of images of what you think the comic should look like. And we do them in film, basically to sell the movie. And so we had this whole beautiful storyline, and so this year, I was going to start pitching it to comic book publishers, but then going down to Haiti to work with Kezia and to be right there, because just being right there is inspirational. So my next comic project, which I worked very hard on, is gone until you know what goes away.
Until, yes.
Yes. Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think that when you have a really close relationship with an artist, as you mentioned before with Flavia, or maybe back in the day with JR in terms of, collaboration, do you guys stop being writer artists and you become a third entity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing with Flavia that's sad is that I didn't have a close relationship with her. It was all because of the language barrier, and she lives in another country. And, I just loved her, and I loved everything she did. And she seemed to be able to see into me, and she knew exactly what I was doing. Family drama, intergenerational family drama, where a lot of love is buried under distance. And she did it all with body language. It was just brilliant, just the way Lana related to her father versus her mother versus her grandmother. And there's aspects of Lana that she's very predatory towards her grandmother, because she realizes her grandmother, who was raised over a speakeasy during Prohibition, she realizes her grandmother has secrets. She saw things, and Lana pushes her and pushes her and pushes her, when in fact, the old lady probably wants to forget. And so you can feel the vulnerability in some of the shots with the grandmother lying in bed, and Lana's just like pushing. So Flavia captured all that. But yes, there's a third thing that happened that is all Flavia. It's me and Flavia. And I would say that with Flavia, it's just this amazing, lyrical, loving embrace. But back in the day, before internet, you had to be on the phone and meet in person. I mean, John Romita and I were like, he'd come into the office and we'd talk, and there was no way you'd have a collaboration with someone that you didn't go drinking with too, I mean, I'm sort of exaggerating, but a lot of the artists lived right in New York or close to New York. There was a studio in Connecticut where people like Brett Blevins and Bill Sienkiewicz were there. And then there was the Howard Chaykin, who was doing his American Flag. And I think I forget who he shared his studio with, but Walt. It
was Walter. It was Howard. I am not sure if Starling was there, but I'm pretty sure he was, because on Red Star, you have photos of the people he used as models.
Oh yeah.
And it was all of them. It was even Frank at a very young age was a model for Red Star.
Well, and that's funny, because a lot of those studios, they would just do fight scenes and take pictures and then use each other, all the time. And then plus Bernie, I was also upstate a lot. Bernie Wrightson used to have his yearly Halloween party, where and Bernie lived in this amazing house with Michelle, who was a colorist, and he had, it was the house of bones. It was just basically full of skulls, and there was always something in a vat getting its flesh eaten off. And we had so there was an upstate community too. There was Jim Starlin was up here, Dan Green, who was the inker for the X-Men. Herb Trimp had he used to draw the Hulk, and he did he was a World War I open pilot. He had one of those planes like Snoopy the Red Baron. And so we would meet on the airstrip. And I remember one time I think it was Jim Starlin, Bernie Wrights, and me, Dan Green, Sandy Green, his wife, who was a model for Jeff Jones. We all went up. He took us up and did, loop-de-loops and scared the shit out of us and cut the engine off. And, you'd just be hovering there and then he'd kick it back in. And it was so much fun. I mean, so because the wonderful pre-internet life was humans met in person, had adventures, and that's a lot of that ended up in the seeds because I am and remember before tech addiction kind of distanced, people, it's the cliche, it brings you together and it throws you apart. So Lola, the character in the seeds, was literally based on me saying, I would like to go someplace where I don't give a shit if anyone can find me, and I don't Google everything that I forget, and all that stuff. And there's no drones, there's no surveillance. And so that's where that came from, really, because I remember the time before.
And now let me show you something before we continue. I hope I don't break it. You're going to recognize this.
Oh, wow. Hey.
Can you see it?
Beautiful. Oh, you're so, you're to have that.
I got
that
this.
Is a gorgeous page.
I got this like, I don't know, 15 years ago maybe. And it's been hanging on my wall. John, when I had John here, he saw I had it and he was like, whoa, you still have that? And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to sell it. Like, oh, most people sell them. Not me.
Is that? No. It's funny. Art Adams gave me a page of Longshot, and it's a beautiful page. It's got Longshot, and there was a crew of skateboard kids that were real kids in New York City. And he gave me this page, and over the years, I've gotten like emails from people that are like, I'll pay you, it started with like, I'll pay you $1,000, I'll pay you. And now it's up to like, somebody emailed me, I'll give you 10 grand for that page. And I'm like, I could really use 10 grand, but it's like, I don't know. Arthur gave it to me. So I have a bunch of pieces of the artwork I have that because I've never bought a piece of artwork. I mean, other than my friend's art, it's pages from stories I wrote where the artist said, you need a page of this, So, I mean, Marie Severin and I did a Toxic Avenger together, which was so much fun. It was basically like a feminist Toxie, the female. Toxie's, nobody knows these characters, but Toxie's girlfriend takes over and decides she wants to be the lead of the comic. And Marie and I had so much fun making that comic together. And then Marie did a bunch of strips with me in them. She did one where I go insane and I go from being a mild-mannered assistant editor to wanting to take over the Marvel Universe, and she gave me pages. And it's like I look at them and there's me and Marie giggling and with evil giggles coming up with these stories together. So,
How important it is for you, or let me rephrase. How much do you learn about yourself when you get, after, cooling down, having not read that script for months, when you get it back, the published version, and you read it? How much did you learn about yourself, about the things that weren't conscious when you were writing that?
Even though writers like to pretend that they're not being autobiographical, it's all autobiographical, of course. And I don't read my old stuff, because I tend to not like anything I've ever done. Eventually I'll like it. Like I reread Ruby Falls because we're, working on turning it into a pitch for film. And I was like, I kind of loved it. And I was just like, oh, wow, this is really a beautiful comic. And I don't usually have that reaction. I think it's because the superhero stuff, I still have a problem with escalating things to violence and everything is resolved in a fight. And so even though I like some of the stories, you know, I love the whole Typhoid Mary thing that I did with Johnny. I mean, we had so much fun with that. But you know, Johnny and I were always like, what else can we put in the comic? You know, so it was like nuclear war, animal rights, and you know, to a certain degree, you look back and you realize I never embraced superhero form. I was always trying to justify my violent stories by having something else. And it was interesting. The Seeds is definitely, there are aspects of it. These are stories I've been telling for a long time. You know, I've been telling animal rights stories for a long time. Yes. And there it is, the farmer again, and the farmer, you know, having trouble killing his animals. And it's because of my grandfather who was a farmer. And so that's an important storyline to me. My partner I had used to keep bees, and you know, that's an important story to me. The zone where there's no internet, it's all comes out of your personal feelings about the world.
Yeah.
And then the artist brings their personal feelings about the world, and then there's a thing that happens that neither one of you can predict. It just happens. Yeah. Like it's a place where an artist and writer in the language of storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. How when you're writing, or when you have an idea for a story, being for film, being for comics, instinctively you go first for the structure. I mean the formal side of it, or is emotion that calls you to do something? The emotions.
I think that you need a story that you feel like working on. You have to be driven through. If I'm like coming up with a story idea and I'm realizing that I'm not having, because before Ruby Falls, I had another comic, a graphic novel. It was sort of after I was pretty much finished with the Seeds, and then Karen wanted me to do something. I had a story left, but every time I went down to plot it, it wasn't coming easy. And so I switched to Ruby Falls. So for every comic you see from a writer, there are tons of stories that you started that you dropped and started and dropped because you weren't feeling them. So you have to feel them, and you have to want to be with them for, you know, a year or however long it takes to, you know, make a graphic novel. And Haiti, that's a world I wanted to be in. And that comes from deep, deep emotion from my students and how much they taught me about life, because life in Haiti is profoundly different from life here. You know, it is pre-internet down there in some ways, because the government doesn't give them much electricity. So it's hard to get cell service. It's hard to get on a computer. And so you're out in the street a lot. You know, it's a whole different living life. It's very communal, you know, kids and dogs and chickens and donkeys and grandma, and, you know, it's like a big mix. And I really loved living like that. And so that was like the feeling I wanted to capture in the Haitian comic. And then working with Kezia, we came up with a storyline that was very important to us that had to do with busting some of the worst myths about Haiti. So it's kind of it was a little bit like a horror comic. So yeah, I guess it's just a feeling that it's a story you want to hang around with, and you feel like that other people would want to read it, of course. I mean,
of course. But also there's the thing that, you know, even when some creators have told me, no, I completely distance myself, that character is not me at all, blah, blah, blah. I always say bullshit. You write, even if the smallest way, what you write, it's part of you. So you gotta be not in love, maybe that's the word, but you gotta have some care for what you're doing. If not, why doing it? As you said, you have to live with it for months, right?
Yeah, and I think the superhero narrative, you always have to respect the icon. You have to respect, you have to respect who Wolverine is, who Punisher is, and you can find an angle. Like I remember I wrote a Captain America story, and Captain America was so angry at what the government was doing. And I don't know what war we were in. We were invading some country. This would have been in the 80s. And Captain America like just rips up magazines on a news station, so angry at not feeling like he is America anymore. And Captain America is a profound character because he goes back to Jewish creators and anti-Semitic times who couldn't get any work because of prejudice, creating a character to punch Hitler in the face. So, you have to, with superhero comics, it's you, but it isn't you because the icon itself is more important than you. You're adding an adventure, you're putting some of your, so really it was the Seeds and Ruby Falls and my first graphic novel, Someplace Strange, were the only 3 times in comics I got to not have a superhero, and it's difficult because the superhero buttress becomes addictive because you can just kind of, it's a historical profound buttress, whether it's whatever character it is, and then you can hang your story on this architecture that has been built by geniuses like Jack Kirby or so you're just sort of adding to the buttress. I mean, certainly Frank Miller, I had Roger McKenzie before me and Frank Miller, and you have it's just it's when you're writing something that is just you've created, it's completely personal and it's like turning yourself inside out. I mean, the only element in the Seeds, like the newsroom stuff, is from all my years in bullpens. I mean, magazine after magazine after, and the sensibility is definitely from shooting films with the way the shots are, and then of course, David's just flat out genius. He's a genius, of course, and I learned a lot from him. He did some things that were really so much fun for me. The first plot was kind of a mess. It was just, I don't know, we were nervous and scared, and it was, I don't know, it was kind of a mess. And he decided to break the comic into chapters. And that inspired me to say, wow, chapters. I can do little short stories. So there's, other than like the transitional scenes, you could pull in the zone where there's no internet, the first characters you meet in the zone are a farmer and a beekeeper, and you could pull all their stories out and read them as one story. So I was sort of designing these short stories, and there's a naturalist and a tech guy who are the absolute opposites. He's like Elon Musk, and the other guy is just like, I forget the name of the guy that wrote Botany Desire, any naturalist. And their stories are self-contained. There's one in each issue. You could pull them out. So I had this beautiful opportunity, vignettes that were like short stories that over the 4 issues are one story. And there were all these duets. There was the naturalist and the queenmaker. There was the farmer and and then there was the alien. And it's interesting. The aliens were, I guess I can't say that I'm the alien other than that it is a big metaphor for loving the other. There was definitely that but I remember because the Seeds, before it was the Seeds, was a 50s tabloid hoax hunting comic. It was called Scoop, and there were like reporters going off and finding Bigfoot, finding whatever, the Yeti, and I had written a play years ago that was about a hoax hunting newsroom, and it was performed. It was really fun, and I was always like, I loved that bullpen energy of chasing wacky stories, plus the pressure from the editor, like, I gotta sell it. So that's what it originally was. And then when the reporter falls in love with an alien, that basically becomes the center of the next comic. Scoop was obviously never made. It was something David and I wanted to do before we landed on the Seeds. And so then I had to think about aliens. I had to be like, who are these aliens? And so, aliens are usually very brilliant and save the universe, or they're very evil and destroy the universe. And I had a plumber working in my loft in the city at the time, and every time he came in, he added another pipe and another pipe and another pipe. And I started looking at him like, what are you doing? You're like some kind of like really bad plumber who's trying to pretend they're a good plumber by adding pipes and pipes and pipes and pipes. And I thought, these are the aliens. They come into your house and they start sticking pipes everywhere. And the next thing you know, and they're just like incompetent. Mm-hmm. And I was also like reading stories like about, if we have this Florida, I don't know if you ever heard of Florida Man, but Florida is this state in the United States where people are always like committing crimes, but they commit them so badly. So, it's the kind of thing where the guy breaks into someone's house and the TV's on and he gets sucked into the TV show and forgets he's doing a break-in and gets caught. So I also saw the aliens as kind of like, really just bad job. I originally had a spaceship that was like a piece of junk so that you can look at it. Could it fly? Could it not fly? Are they really aliens, or did they just build this ship and they're insane? So there always was this kind of like feeling to the aliens that they were just fuck ups. They were just, and then the next thing is, I draw. I do little thumbnails for my comics that are really bad, but it's just
Drink.
Oh yeah. It's just to it's just that I know I could draw the comic if I had to draw the comic, but the aliens were like, how's David gonna pull this off? I mean, it's not easy to pull off aliens. And so he pretty much took this description that they're like junky plumbers and fuck ups and books. And then I said, why don't we make one happy, I forget what it was, one happy, one sad, one angry, one whatever. And then David just took off and he did all these designs for aliens. And what he landed on was so wonderful. It was just so perfect. And one of the things that happened with the Seeds is that I had the 4 issues pretty much written and outlined while Obama was in office. Mm-hmm. And then when Trump got elected, me and all my friends fell into such a deep, deep, deep depression. And, I decided I can't just ignore this. And so the main evil alien ended up being Trump. Mm-hmm. He sits underground and watches a TV cartoon and mimics the TV cartoon and essentially like tweets his evil out into the world. And he's like a big baby and he blows up at nothing and he shoots his TV like Elvis, that myth that Elvis like shot his TV. I mean, it's sort of like, so they evolved. That's how they evolved. And it's interesting because years ago, I did a comic where I kind of like, Trump was always like this jerk, in the 90s, New York, he wanted to build the biggest building. And, in New York, we were like, why do these guys get to build these buildings? Don't they realize they're casting a long shadow on everyone else? And so with John Van Fleet, we did a story about Trump and it opens with the gold T rising. And this is in the 90s. And his huge building happens to cast a shadow on Poison Ivy's window where she's growing plants. And so that was like, and and his name was, DC made us change it. It was Donald Trump. And they made me put like Trimble or something. They made me change his name for, because it was so obvious. And this is the second time I got to mock Trump.
Not that he doesn't deserve it. So
Yeah.
and today they're certifying, electoral college, they're certifying the
Yes.
results of the election. So we are all going to be very happy. He's going to try a coup until the last day. We know that, but
Yeah.
fuck it.
Yeah.
What is for you? And then we go with the fan questions, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
What is for you the most unique thing in the comics language?
I mean, I think working with David, it really deepened my understanding of how profound it mostly because he's so talented, the rhythms that he put into. I mean, I honestly would give him 4 or 5 panel pages, even when I knew he was making it a 9 panel page, because it was just so exciting to see how he played the chess game. It's the chess game of comics. It just is. So, for me, it's this linguistics. It's a profound linguistics that is made up of words and pictures, and it's different from every other medium. It's intimate because unlike film, where film you're completely dictated to, a reader gets to, go with their own pace.
Yes.
The director isn't controlling the pace with just the 90-minute thing. And so I think that it's the joy is the building blocks. And it's like, oh, what should I cut away to? What should I do? And then what is the artist going to do becomes this like, and so I learned a lot working with David, I think. And about just by the way he took all the pieces I gave him, threw them up in the air, and they came down in a different order. That was fascinating to see.
And it's also about, as you just said, and I love that, when we talk about any other art form, especially movies, novels, etc., it's passive. It goes. You just watch it. You pause, but that's it. With comics, if we don't have reader participation, it doesn't work. It's the most involving and active art form, right?
Yeah, and I also think that I pulled a lot of stuff out. There's a lot of stuff that I knew. There's big backstories written for each character, and I ended up pulling a lot of stuff out of the scripts because I did like 4 or 5 drafts with Karen Berger before sending to David. Except for that, we had a weird first issue that was like, I don't know what we were doing. We were finding our way, but I ended up pulling a lot of stuff out that would solve the mysteries. There's a lot of like, are the aliens real or not? What's going on here? And in the very first issue, there's a guy whose wife has gone into the zone, and he says, she left me, she didn't leave me. And that is like a key to the whole comic. She left me, she didn't leave me. It's like, you could see it, the whole comic and everything in it. It's very quantum mechanic, alternate reality kind of thing, because if you're going to do an alien comic, the landscape has to support the quantum mechanic notion. Absolutely. Where is it a particle? With quantum mechanics, I don't know much about it, but I know that you can either pinpoint the particle or its movement. And so I kept thinking of the aliens you're adding a quantum mechanics character into a naturalistic landscape, because it was a natural landscape. It's only a few years into the future. They had to have, so the whole comic had to have this rhythm of, is it or isn't it, And, so that was fun. That was really fun. And that really became pulling answers out and leaving more mystery, so that the readers, whatever the reader thinks the comic is about, that's valid, because there's clues to reading it multiple ways. And the reader is allowed to have their own interpretation of the whole thing.
It's always about, as you just said, we talk about when they discover that electrons are at the same time a particle and a beam.
Yeah.
You never know which one it is. They can start here and then be in 2 places at the same time. So you always have to adapt to the notion, as you said, alternate realities and the multiverse. Yeah. I always say you have 4 strong forces, but then one of them is really weak, which is gravity. in our universe.
Yes.
So I always theorize and have fun telling, imagine how gravity is in a multiverse where the gravity is really the strongest force. Everybody's like this because gravity pulls them down. Anyway, that's my crazy shit. Let's
No,
go.
that's great. That's a basis for a comic. I mean, if there are any young writers out here, that is the basis for a comic, a world in which you're what you just pitched it.
Yep.
And as an editor, I would say, I love that idea. I actually would say, I love it. Let's see if, that's the beauty of comics. You can do that.
Yeah, that's exactly. It doesn't depend on budgets. It's just the idea and the right editor and going to the point where you say, as I always say, is there any limits to comics? No, because the only limits is somebody saying, why not?
Now I have to challenge you to write the comic where there's no gravity.
Okay.
Imagine like Mobius or Little Nemo. But I mean, I love that idea because it's a psychological idea. Would everyone feel oppressed and smushed? Or would they be untethered and
No, but here, if we stand, that's what it keeps us from falling. Because we are in the exact amount of gravity. But imagine that gravity is multiplied by 6. You can fall because you are flat like this. You are, instead of being vertical, you are horizontal. So we are all blobs.
I love it, man. I love it. You got to stop
me because then I'm going to start talking about 2 dimensions because they're flat and horizontal, and 3 dimensions as no. Stop. No, stop. Okay.
You got to start coming, dude.
Well, I did a couple and I published them with DC years ago, believe it or not. But I let it for professionals like you. I'm just a scoundrel. Anyway, let's go. Facebook. Questions on Facebook. Says Argent Comics. I'm so. By the way, Anne, I don't know what's happening today because normally we can see the questions on the right here.
Yeah.
But I don't know what's going on today. I can't read the questions, so I'm going.
Surprise me.
I'm going back and forth to Facebook and YouTube where the questions are. Okay. So if I'm going in the wrong order, people, sorry about that. I just have to move from screen to screen.
Very, very sorry. Yes.
So Argent Comics says, and you are an awesome writer. I love your work. Your Daredevil time was was next level. If the MCU takes this Daredevil series, maybe you could write it. You know the character like nobody else.
Oh, well, thank you, whoever you are. That was very sweet.
That's Argent. The name is Argent Comics.
Argent Comics, thank you very much. The TV people don't let us crazy comic book writers anywhere near the show.
Yeah.
Although they've used my storylines. I mean, I love the Daredevil show. I'm part of the Save Daredevil, hashtag that I think Vince D'Onofrio started to bring back the Kingpin and Charlie Cox and all. I mean, I adore that show. I think it's just it feels like Daredevil. And so they're taking comic creator storylines. They're being really respectful of the comic creators. And, I think they took a bunch of stuff. I know I'm thanked in the show, but I mean, that's fine with me. I like what TV writers do. They take things to another level. Of course, Typhoid Mary went on to she was in, what was it? Iron Fist. And yes. I guess there were a lot of plans. Typhoid Mary was supposed to go into a bunch of the other shows and basically torture everybody, yes. Which would have been a blast. But then there was the Disney buying Marvel, and Sony and Fox had complicated deals and the Netflix deal. So a lot of that stuff is just out of our hands. And so if they bring back the plans for Typhoid, she'll be in a lot of shows. But TV series are weird. When they get rid of one show producer, they tend to kill everything that the show producer ever did. And it's really kind of obnoxious because we don't really do that in comics. We always respect the writer that went before, build on what they did, and lay a groundwork for the next writer. And I think that's one of the things about comic book field is because we're all friends and we all support each other. But TV's different. If like a show producer's gone, They're going to say, oh, we're not going to do any of his ideas. So none of us know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's like I always remind people. They told me why Disney didn't promote or even looked like they wanted to kill John Carter, the movie, and I was like, oh, that's because they knew there was a new president in the studio. Like, what do you mean?
Exactly.
He wanted to fuck all the projects from the former guy, so he looked like he was doing the right thing and getting a lot of money for Disney. And the other ones were all bad projects. So,
no, you're absolutely right, and it's really, really sad. It's really sad that they do that because there was a lot of work done before, and you respect your predecessors.
Exactly.
You know?
Carlos Pacheco, I think you know this artist, Carlos Pacheco. Also on Facebook. She was the editor that changed the shape of mainstream comics working with Arthur Adams. The artist generation from the 90s took him as the style to follow, and all of this was started in Longshot. 1986 was a sort of crossroad with two roles, Watchmen and Longshot.
Oh, thank you so much. You're so sweet. I mean, I always think of me and Arthur, we were so young. We were kids. And I always think of Longshot as like a garage band. We didn't know how to play our instruments, so we were just like, I was like, okay, Arthur, you sing, I'll play the guitar, you bang on the drums. We were just like, it was very kind of like punk, you don't need to know how to play your instruments. You just get up there and wail. And, we were new to making comics. Mm-hmm. And I had only done a couple things before, and he had only done, I'm not sure he had done anything yet. So we were over enthusiastic and such a sweet human being. So a lot of Arthur's sweetness, and I don't know, I often thought of us as like two puppy dogs, like we didn't even know how to walk yet. But we were really, really happy and enthusiastic. And I think that spirit is in Longshot, the character himself. And, Arthur and I both love monsters. I mean, my dad was a scientist, and, I had like all this, like, that's why I love Emile Ferris, who's going to be on your show. And I can't wait for that episode because I just adore her work. But, we both love monsters. And so back then, people would use the fax or FedEx, because again, this is a pre-internet comic, and Arthur would send like sheets and sheets and sheets of monsters, and I'd go like, oh my God, that one. So he designed Spiral. I think Spiral, say, how about a character with 6 arms? That was just a monster that came in that Arthur drew, and I went, and Mojo, of course, the spineless ones, that was all him. So I think it was like a garage band that wasn't meant to go anywhere, but we had a lot of fun, and we couldn't play our instruments yet.
And just so you know, Arthur, when he was here months ago, somebody asking about the supposed graphic novel Longshot that was going to happen. And and he was like, well, I don't know if Anne has forgiven me yet because of that, because it was because of me. I was so busy with other things that we really could never do it.
Oh, no, yeah, there's tons of stuff that falls by the wayside, and it's how it was meant to be. I mean, the one thing that, Arthur's thumbnails so beautiful, and he laid out that whole is a book that he made that is the thumbnails of that story, and they're so beautiful. It's like Alex Toth, they're just brushstrokes. And I every once in a while when I see Arthur, I'm like, man, you already drew it. It's just you drew it as Alex Toth, but he's Arthur Adams, and so for him, he didn't draw it. So we joke about it, and no, it's also like I didn't understand how to make a comic yet. And so now I give artists, tops 4 or 5 panels, maybe 6, and I draw it all out myself first to make sure it could be done. Back then, I was giving Arthur, like, making, classic mistakes, like panels where I'd expect 2 things to happen in one panel. So it was sort of like 16 panel pages. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, he would have died if he had had to draw that graphic novel. It was too much.
Okay.
I
Let me
have
see.
no memory. I have no memory of the story. I must admit what the story was.
Okay. It'll come back. So one way or the other, you guys finish it. It took George and Marv 25 years to finish, new Teen Titans games. So maybe, sometime you guys will finish it. Who knows? Who
Who
knows?
knows?
Let's see. Angel Parra says, for Marvel Fanfare, you wrote Chiaroscuro, a small story illustrated by David Mazzucchelli. Could you tell us how that story was born?
I don't really remember, but I was the assistant editor to Al Milgram on Marvel Fanfare. And Marvel Fanfare was kind of a place where you could either try out young talent, a writer or an artist, or sometimes an artist would come into the office and be like, I have no work, I need money. And you would put them in Marvel Fanfare. So there's a lot of really great art in Marvel Fanfare, often because an artist or a writer didn't know what they were going to do next. So I have no idea. I don't really know. David Mazzucchelli was probably in my office and we're talking and he's like, let's work together. And I'm like, yeah, let's work together. It probably was something very natural. Mm-hmm. And he was between projects because he went on to do the great Osteoporosis, however you say that.
Asterios polyp.
Yes, and that was like, that's a masterpiece. So he probably was anticipating what he was going to do next, but wasn't. So really it was about the idea that what if the angel was seen, through the eyes of an old religious woman who believed in angels. Mm-hmm. And so from there it came like, I think I was editing the X-Men at the time, maybe, or I don't really remember. I'd have to look at the years when that happened. But it became the idea that there was some big battle in the X-Men and the angel got hurt and fell out of the sky. And so the whole story is from the point of view of the old lady whose backyard he falls into. And so it was meant to be like, what is an angel? And talk about fall. I just realized that I've done the falling leaf thing before because we wanted to have feathers falling all the time, And it was also another obsession, which is media, because I had done a lot with Mojo and how I was sort of nervous about how people were getting addicted to their media. Yes. Back then it was television, and so this lady was sitting in her home and doing the doom scrolling. But the TV was full of so many things that were scary that she no longer could leave her house. She had agoraphobia, as we all have now. And the angel, without a word, he doesn't have a single line, I don't think, inspires her to just literally just leave her house. And that's the whole story. So, yeah, thank you. I love that story.
Okay. Paulo Cesar says, keep big hellos from Costa Rica. A complete privilege to have you around. Can you elaborate a bit on characters you create, for example, Longshot, and the existentialist aspect in them? Thank you.
Oh, what a great question. And hello to Costa Rica. You must be warm down there, huh?
Yes, banter.
I think that came from, again, before you know what you're doing in comics, you do some weird things. And I think that there should be a place for young creators to do weird things. Now that Marvel and DC are, they have their IP is so valuable. You can't really mess with the characters the way you used to be able to mess with characters because the IP is so valuable. But I think that, I didn't know what I was doing yet. And so I was like, I want to create a character that is a blank slate, which doesn't know who he is. He's amnesiac, comes from another dimension or whatever. And I think that came from this idea of what is a superhero, what is a human being. It was kind of an existential idea. And I don't really know. I think that there's a certain process that goes on in writing comics now with valuable IP that some of the creativity is gone because you're even more beholden to the iconic whatever. I don't know. That didn't answer your question at all. I'm sorry.
Makes perfect sense. Don't worry about it. Let me see. Angel Parra says, as a writer, you've worked on Spider-Woman, Longshot, Star Wars, Daredevil, Spider-Man, Typhoid Mary, Creed Eternity, and blah, blah, blah. What do you think are the strengths and weaknesses of your scripts?
Oh, well, I think my scripts have evolved over the years. And when you're first learning, you're putting too much in the comic. You're expecting the comic to do more than it can. There's also, I always had this weird thing. I wanted every reader to get their money's worth. So I was always very scared I wanted there to be like lots of excitement every page, cliffhanger every page, and so I would pack too much into a comic because I wanted you to get your money. And over the years, I've started pulling things out and trusting myself more that like a story that is simpler has its own power. So I think the weaknesses of my early scripts, where I was trying to pack too much in, way too much in, and I wasn't trying to write in pictures yet. And then eventually when I learned how to write in pictures and call for shots, much the way, learning a lot mostly from the film business, because I was 10 years in the film business. I think my scripts got better, but you can still completely mess up. You can still have a narrative that you think is working and then somehow it just doesn't work. And so I think that one of the things is you have to constantly not think you're so great, Like, so the artists that keep getting better don't think they're geniuses, don't know they're geniuses. They just keep getting better because they're like, I didn't get it yet, So.
Well, that's the thing and the curse of an artist, as you are. By the end of the day, you look at your stuff and say, "Oh my God," and keep thinking about how to get better the next day. The moment you get comfortable with it, you just quit, right?
Also, some of the best comics are a mess. Some of the best I like comics when they're kind of messy and they show their seams and they show the thought processes. If I read a perfect comic, I don't know what a perfect comic is, but I'm kind of more of a fan of messes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so let's go to the questions on YouTube. Felipe González Hernandez says, Miss Nocenti, it is a pleasure to have you here. I have always liked your work very much because it has a unique voice and style. How do you remember your work as an editor? I've always thought that the 80s was a great time in terms of creativity in the world of comics, and Marvel in particular, and you were a big part of it.
Well, I mean, I had an amazing experience as an editor. I love teaching, that's why I spent so much time teaching. I've been teaching film a lot. I mean, in the Arctic Circle to Indigenous kids I go into natural teacher mode quite often. And so editing is really just bringing someone's voice out. Everyone has a voice, and you don't want them to just hang too much, like we were talking about, on the buttress of a superhero narrative. You want them to bring themselves into the comic while respecting the superhero. I was an editor of magazines. I never edited indie comics. I don't know how I would approach that. Maybe it would be even more bringing a voice to light. But I also had this the Marvel Comics in the 90s was like a mentor tank. You'd get there and you literally had Steve Ditko coming into the office. Stan Lee used to come in and out. You had Marie Severin, John Romita Sr. It was insane. It was Larry Hama, Denny O'Neil, Archie Goodwin. And then Louise Simonson taught me basically everything that I know. So it's like you look back and you're like, I was trained by so much talent. And so there was such a sense of, you're new, let me teach you, just mentoring. So I think that I just was like a sponge. I watched a lot. I was Marvel had a lot of crazy cut up. There was all these shenanigans all the time, and I was a little more like shy and just watching it all. And so the training ground was fantastic, and that's how I learned how to edit comics. I guess it exists today. I don't know if it exists today. I mean, definitely not during the pandemic. Everybody's working from home, but
yeah, they're working from home. Yes, I have to work with them. Depends on the day. One is in Montana, the other was in Arkansas, some is in New York. So it's even different time zones for them too. So they're doing their best. That's what I can say. Rita Carambola says, "Hi Ann, it's so exciting to see you live." Another question here. Okay, this is the guy from Costa Rica sending the question in 2 different social media, so I'm jumping on. Your work at Marvel always had a message and a very strong social conscience. Have you always thought about doing it that way, or was it the characters and the story telling it to you to go in that direction?
I think it's just in my bones because my parents were very socially conscious. They had me, my brother and sister doing volunteer work at a very young age. I was pretty young when I was working at the this Christian retreat that was for kids that were either physically or mentally challenged. And so there was always a strong thing in my family to have a social conscience. So I think I just got that from growing up, family life. And, it was just in my blood from my family. My brother now runs the East Harlem set, is putting out like food for everyone during the pandemic. And he's like, and my sister's a surgeon. We're all very do something for the universe people. So I think that it came from that, but also, Matt Murdock in particular, that it's in his blood too, from, what the writers have done before. Matt Murdock is he's probably my favorite character. What can I say? It's just the combination of his confusion. Spider-Man is Spider-Man, and Spider-Man does as a spider can. Matt Murdock was raised by a nun, and he wears a devil suit. He tries to solve things in the courts, and when he can't, he becomes a vigilante. He is not a pure character. He is multiple contradictions. So I related to him because I'm not a pure character. I mean, I have like all this stuff going on inside me at war with everything. And so I think that it was very easy to take him on, just throw him into an adventure that happened to involve a girl fighting for to stop factory fighting, and he would sort of think about it and have to apply his vigilante mind, his legal mind, his Christian soul. So he has like multiple points of view within one character, and he hops. It's a little bit multiple personality, which is what, when Johnny and I came up with Typhoid Mary, we talked about that. We talked about how, he has so many points of view and so many contradictory points of view that the foil for him was this woman who was made up of many different types of females, but that was built on the work of artists that came before me, where clearly Frank Miller, he had a history of being vulnerable to women with problems, with Karen Page. She's a junkie, she's a prostitute, so, and that's a lot of thought process. And that was basically me and John Romita Jr. like jamming, and, it meant a lot. Johnny loved coming up with villains. Like he came up with, I don't know, I'm going off point here, but one day, we were both picking up stuff from the streets of New York. I was in Hell's Kitchen all the time. And he, one day he was like, I got this guy a shotgun, and I saw him, and he was doing this and this and this, and here's how he'd look. And then it would be like, bingo in the comic, because you always really want the artist you're working with to have ideas. And there's often like a shyness to it, where artists you're just dictating to the artist what to draw, and that's no fun. The artist to bring themselves into it. So that thing you were talking about before, that third weird thing that emerges,
Entity.
like
I always call it the entity.
yeah, the entity. Like Arthur Adams and I, we had the entity, which was like the garage band puppy, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Let me see. Angel Parra asks the last question because I don't want to abuse. Sorry, Angel, I'm not reading all your questions because you've sent a lot, but most of them I'm reading. The last one I don't want to abuse. With what issue or story of Daredevil were you most satisfied? And which one was the one that you did like the least?
Well, I mean, they're all my children. This is not Sophie's choice where I have to, but
Yeah.
I do think that, the beginning of my arc, I didn't really understand what a superhero was yet, and so I kept weird villain after weird villain. Like I was focusing too much on the villains, and Daredevil was like a prop in some villain story, and I came up with all these creepy villains. And then it was really only when I started looking to Daredevil himself. So the whole run with Bullet and Lance, Lance is a kid that if the story resonates today because it's a kid who was. I was raised during, we were all scared of nuclear energy. And, you know, it wasn't that long ago that they were having you dive under your desk in school to prepare for nuclear, and which is ridiculous. So that little kid, Lance, was afraid of nuclear fallout. And his father was very explosive. His father was like a bomb. And so that dynamic, bringing Daredevil into that dynamic, and then, of course, the Typhoid Mary stories, that whole run, I think Johnny and I really hit our stride. We just, it just was, maybe that would be my most favorite time.
Mm-hmm. You don't want to answer about your least favorite story you created on
The
DD?
what?
He asked for he asked for your favorite and the story that you like the least that you in Daredevil.
Oh, well, I think the least I like is towards the end of the run. I mean, I like the Christmas stories. You know, I did a story where Daredevil just gets drunk in a bar, and it was funny because I was dating a guy. We had broken up ridiculously on like Christmas Eve, and I was like, oh shit, I got nowhere to go. And I went into a bar. I spent one of probably the most fun Christmas Eves ever in a bar in Manhattan with all these people that also had nowhere to go. Uh-huh. And it sort of, and that was just like so much fun. You know, it happened and then it appeared. It took a whole year for me to be able to do that story because it happened. And then I had to say, shit, I'm going to write this up, but I have to wait a year for the next Christmas. So I love that story. And I think my least favorite stories are when I was losing interest in the book. And so towards the end, I did some stuff that I liked. I gave Daredevil a black girlfriend, an activist girlfriend, and I was taking him down into something that would have worked today. It was almost like a Black Lives Matter thing. It was like activism in the street, and he was starting to flirt with this black girl, and obviously they were going to have a relationship, and he was going to get more involved with the activist movement in New York, which was happening in the 80s.
Yep.
Also, and for similar issues. And I think maybe it was too much for Marvel Comics. I could tell that my editor, Ralph, wasn't really liking the direction. And I think it was just time to part ways. But I think those stories that, you know, when you know it's time to get off a book, but you're not getting off it yet, that's probably the moment.
Okay. So let me see. Giuseppe, Lord Frank says, it's a true honor to meet you. How did you have the idea? You and Johnny had the idea to create Typhoid Mary. Were the editors telling you guys that you needed to create another femme fatale, you know, like Elektra?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, because I think it goes back to the question I answered about my parents having us do volunteer work, and I was, you know, all my life I've done volunteer work. So I worked in a lot of asylums. You know, I worked in Wasaic, which was a it was a prison for the criminally insane, and it just was something that I was thinking about, was mental illness, and mental illness specifically into how a woman could fracture herself into like the typical Madonna whore, the typical like gendered fracture.
Yes.
Who am I supposed to be? Am I supposed to be a housewife? Am I supposed to be this? Is it okay to be a slut? You know, and there's like there's something in the seeds that kind of relates to that. But so I think it was just the idea of presenting into the Marvel universe a female character that was not a hero, that was not a villain, not all villain, not all hero, not bad girl, not good girl. She was everything. Because in the 80s, you tended to have women in comics that were family or secretary, or, you know, and so it was kind of, and Johnny really got into the idea, and probably he wouldn't want me saying this, but he was dating a girl that was a little, you know, eccentric. And I think he just channeled a lot of this girl that he knew. So there was like another entity, you know, it was like stuff I was thinking about, stuff Johnny was experiencing, and the entity, the third thing, became Typhoid.
Okay. Let me see. Next one. How do you remember you work as an editor? You work on Marvel with messages, blah, 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 blah. Daredevil was excellent and marked a milestone in the character. The road trip in which he becomes a vehicle for dealing with social issues was a preconceived plan, or was it emerging gradually for you?
Well, I knew I wanted to take him out of Hell's Kitchen because, you know, at some point, the domain of a character gets claustrophobic, and you want to strengthen the fact that he is a product of Hell's Kitchen, and that is his turf. One way to strengthen that is to take him out of it. So that was, it was definitely a little bit existential, a little bit like, who am I? And he had to leave New York for a while, go on the road trip, also go down to hell and fight Mephisto. You know, he had to leave Hell's Kitchen in order to return to Hell's Kitchen, really knowing what he was doing there. Yeah.
So Felipe Gonzalez asks, in the mid-90s, your work in comics disappears. Were you looking for new ways of expression, or did the crisis in the sector affect you?
No, that's a great question. I think the writing was on the walls, the economic collapse in comics, you know, the Marvel let go of like a lot of people, but you know, I had already been working in journalism and film, so I said, okay, I'm just going to focus more. And then I had a film magazine scenario where I interviewed great directors specifically about what changes from original script to shooting script to finished script to editing. So there's like the whole progression of a writer's journey that is handed over to the director and then eventually to the editor. So I became really versed from having conversations with great directors in a way that kind of heightened my visual storytelling skills, which I always, when I was out of comics and doing journalism and film, I always thought, man, I can't wait to apply this new to comics, you know. And I think, you know, ultimately now that's, you know, I think I would have to say that my best work is The Seeds and Ruby Falls. You know, these two graphic novels are, you know, this, we got to talk about this. Buy it. It's out.
Buy it.
Because I have to say that, you know, launching material in a pandemic year has been really difficult. And, you know, we have all these delays all the time. I mean, this is supposed to hit the direct market on December 23rd, but we don't know if it will. It's in bookstores. It keeps being pushed. Now it's in bookstores the 12th. So it's very hard to get traction. It's very, you know.
Yeah.
So please buy these two comics.
Yes, please do. And as I always say, we know where you live. So if you don't do it,
yeah, I'm gonna go.
Anyway, let's go. How did Nathan M ask? How did the character Blackheart come to be while working in Daredevil with John Romita Jr.? And he also asked, "Your writing in Daredevil is truly magical."
Oh, thank you so much. That's so sweet. I mean, again, I always have to turn to the artist. I don't. We're not. The artist. It's Johnny. When we came up with the idea that the Marvel Universe was going to hell, and I remember it was kind of like, I was like, what if you were allowed to bring hell to New York, which was some kind of overarching event that hit the whole Marvel universe. And these were some of the first shared world events at Marvel. There was the Mutant Massacre. There was a couple others around that time. I'm blanking on what they were, even though I participated.
Yeah, Mutant Massacre, Fall of the Mutants, Inferno, which is the one we're talking about.
Yeah. So at the time, because we were all together in the office, you just sort of run up and down the hall and say, "Hey, Mark Grunwald and Mike Carlin, I think was working with it. Do you want the Avengers to go to hell or not? And then Mark and Mike would call all their writers and say, do you want Cap to go to hell? And so it was like that. And I had the X-Men books, and I can't remember if that came after I left as editor or not, but you'd basically say, yeah, I'll play. And the idea of going to hell, having New York go to hell when it's Hell's Kitchen and it's Daredevil, it was kind of like a no-brainer moment. And I was like, yes. So, subways are always, I think it came when I was in the subway one day. I was like, what if the subway just went to hell? And John Romita got really excited about the idea of drawing Mephisto. And he did those extraordinary drawings of how he would treat Mephisto. And I think that out of that, probably Johnny, me, and Ralph Macchio, always forget to mention the editor. The editor is always part of everything, really. Probably we were jamming on the idea of based on how cool Johnny drew Mephisto, that we would have this spiky creature that was Blackheart. And also Johnny and I were both raised Catholic. He's Italian American, but we both are. And we just like the idea of there being a son of the devil that was not exactly sure he wanted to be as evil as Daddy. I mean, it was sort of like that. So it's very hard to look into the past and know what happened. Did Ralph mention something? Did Johnny mention? I think you have to just assume it was a jam between their artist, writer, and editor.
The third entity.
Yeah, the third entity. That would be, now with those three, it would be a fourth entity.
There you go. We have a fourth. Yes, the third entity. Talks to the fourth entity.
The fourth entity, and like Karen Berger is such a powerful entity. Like, she is all over the Seeds and Ruby Falls. I mean, Karen and I did a lot of. She's such a powerful editor, and she has something similar to what Louise Simonson taught me, which was how to draw something out of a writer or an artist and nurture it without being too
Yeah.
So it's a real skill. It's a real talent that Wheezy had and Karen has to get the best work out of people. So.
Okay, let's go with the next one. Rita Carambola, you know that name. Some topics seem recurring in your works from Longshot, such as identity, memories, what's real and what's fake. You even put it in Ruby Falls, a personal anecdote about it. Funny thing is that you often turn the big issues into something constructive. Are you positive about human beings against this disenchantment? I think it was. I mean, positive as optimistic.
Yeah. Hi. It was Rita. I know Rita from. Hi, Rita. She's one of my internet friends. Yeah. I mean, that was a long question. I'm trying to remember what the essence.
I can repeat it again with no problem. Let me go.
No. I think she's talking about magical worlds or.
It's like she's saying, something that is recurring in your work on Longshot and etc.
I know what she's talking about, memories. So,
Yes.
I mean, it's funny, like for the seeds in Ruby Falls, you can go back into my earlier work and see versions of the same stories.
Yeah.
Like, especially with the seeds, I have earlier versions analyzing media. I have earlier versions of, alternate realities of is it true, is it not true? And with Ruby Falls, especially learning that you can't trust your own memory. That's why when, you say, who created Blackheart? I don't really know. It's kind of like, I know I must have, but Johnny was in the room and Ralph. And so you have to always remember that your memory becomes, and it's really a lot of that is in Ruby Falls, is these gems that you've crafted, because those of us that get interviewed a lot and we answer these questions, at some point we're like, am I just answering the same way I always answer this question and therefore getting further from the truth of it? If you know what I mean? And we all do that with our childhoods. We're like, oh, I remember the first time and that's in Ruby Falls, I remember the first time I rode a horse, and then someday you see a picture of you riding a horse, but you're in your grandfather's lap on the horse. And you're like, oh, that whole memory was false. So it's something that fascinates me because your false memories shape who you are. And of course, today we have the whole, fake reality of things and what people confirmation bias, where you're just looking at the world trying things that confirm your own bias. And it's gotten us in a lot of trouble in the United States, especially with this war, almost civil war between equal halves of the country.
Absolutely. Let me see. Love from Howard, how did you devise all that Mojoverse world and Longshot characters? Was he based on the character Limahl for his physical appearance?
Who? Based on who?
Limahl.
Who's that?
The singer that did the song for the movie The Neverending Story.
I don't know that at all.
Don't worry. Rita is answering him, in fact, saying yes, but that was Arthur's idea. So.
Yes, that was Arthur's idea. Now I know what you're talking about. The visuals for Longshot were all Arthur. I mean, I think I said that the Mojo and his crew were spineless, and I don't remember if I meant it literally or figuratively. They were spineless, and Arthur came up with the spider chair for Mojo. And again, I told you Spiral, I think Arthur created. It just came as a monster in a fax machine. And so Longshot, I think somebody had sent him a sketch. I think Carl Potts, a sketch of him all white. And Arthur was like, no, I don't want to do that. And he flipped it, and it became, and so, and I think that Arthur had some idea he wanted to try a mullet haircut.
Yeah.
And I know the singer, but yes, you're absolutely right. Arthur came up with the mullet.
Okay, absolutely. Let me see. Hi, Alberto Sanchez Guzman asks, how would you write Longshot in the current world, in the today world?
Well, I think you could always bang your head and not know who you are. And the whole tabula rasa notion is still something that you could do. You would just, you don't know who you are. And that's like, what if you didn't know who you are? What memories were still there? What subconscious memories drive you? Mm-hmm. And I think that everyday existence is like that. We don't really know. I mean, I was trying to guess at why I love Emil Ferris's work, because I love monsters, because of something. Why do I put social justice stuff? Is maybe because of my parents. You're just guessing. You don't really know. So I think it's a good question, though, because Longshot came from a world where the media was controlled by one freak, And, you know, I've had a lot of letters from people recently that were like, that's Trump, you know? And it's like, he was more like a media mogul who was trying to control everything. And because at the time, media was buying each other up and becoming one dominant voice that we were being fed, and similar to what's happening to Facebook today. So I think you'd have an obvious thing. You would just transfer it to the world of social media. But, you know, I would not want to write that story. Someone else, please go write that story, but it's not going to be me.
The story's in the air, you guys. You know that.
Yeah.
Log from Howard asked you a funny one. Do you remember if there's any ideas or plots that you had to tell Chris Claremont in X-Men? No, we can't do that.
Well, yes. Chris was basically, he was an idea machine, and Wheezy taught me, you know, and I was the Wheezy's assistant. And so she was just like, just take Chris to lunch, and over lunch, he'll just spout ideas, and you just kind of like make a face that means, and get excited over the, you know. So it was sort of like, Chris was really easy to work with because he just went, da, 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 da. And sometimes he would take a character down an inappropriate road. You know, he wanted to do something that I thought, you know, Xavier wouldn't really do that. And I don't remember exactly what it was, but it had something to do with, because, you know, Chris was ahead of his times because diversity, yes, powerful women.
Yes.
I mean, it was just, that was his whole thing. And he had strong women figures in his past that mentored him. He was all about diversity and strong females. And it was some kind of almost prescient binary thing that happened, that somehow, I think it was Xavier, thought he was a female, or it involved him in heels, you know, and maybe it was some Hellfire Club thing. But I remember thinking, it's not that dignified and maybe we shouldn't do it. But when I look back on that, if I had let him do it, it would have been a radical, prescient story that I didn't let him do. So sorry, Chris.
Okay.
You know? But well, I mean, I think it was more like, you know, the icon, you know, that, you know, there are certain things Xavier won't do. And I probably thought that making him female was not dignified enough for his position. But now everybody switches to female and black. And so I think it was a prescient story that I didn't let Chris do. And I'm sorry.
Or maybe was it just because, of course, it's your prerogative as an editor, you saw the change he wanted to make, but they were like, this is not correctly justified. You know, if we do this, it's got to be done in a certain justifiable way with dignity for the character, right?
Yeah, and there's no way to really know that because it was 30 years ago, but probably Chris gave all his notebooks to Columbia University Archive. Karen Green has the comic library there, and probably you could flip through his notebooks to a certain time during the time he's working with me, and there's probably like Xavier high heels ? And he says no, you know.
Okay, let's go next. Rita tells you, Annie, thanks for making us feel uncomfortable with not indulgent stories. I appreciate that. Ramsey Hassan, I love the comic you and Matsukeli did about the elderly lady who finds Angel and the New Mutants special based on Chomsky's media criticism. How do you handle drama stories versus sounding like a lecture when you're doing comics?
Well, I think that I probably erred on the side of lecturing quite a bit, and early in my run, I think that with the Seeds, there, you know, a lot of it was, I mean, I have mountains of backstory on all the characters. I have a Bible that I wrote about the universe and the world, and I didn't put any of that in. That was just, I think what I've learned to do is how to base things in something, but don't necessarily put it in the comic unless it's in the visuals, unless, you know, first find a visual metaphor. And if that doesn't get drawn somehow, like there are some exposition captions in the Seeds that were literally to cover missing things. And I'm like, oh God, I hate exposition captions. And I think that you get better at it. It's your craft.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a combination of getting better at it and knowing you're still not good at it and continuing to try and get better.
Yeah. So let me see. Ramsey Hassan also asked, I love the comic you and Mazzucchelli did. Oh, no, this is the first one. Was there much editorial pushback and angry fan letters on that brilliant avant-garde New Mutants special?
I think that there is a rumor that I've never really confirmed that because it was basically attacking the idea of a media monopoly and a megalopolis, and that's all Noam Chomsky's theories in the comic with the New Mutants. There's even a character manufacturing consent, and there's situational ethics. And these were because I was becoming a journalist and I was bringing and a lot of this stuff is in the seeds, bringing these conundrums between sales and viewers and clickbait, what's now known as clickbait. And so I heard that the print run, at some point, someone at Marvel got wind of the fact that this was literally a comic that kind of took Marvel to task for being a kind of a monopoly. And they cut the print run, but I've never been able to, I don't know where I heard that. I think someone in distribution told me, oh yeah, they didn't print enough of these, and which is why it's kind of a comic that people don't really see that much, because I don't think they ever printed enough of them. But I never confirmed whether that was a rumor or not. And then I did get a letter from Noam Chomsky, and Noam Chomsky wrote me and said, wow, this was great. Great use of my characters, which is probably litigious, but Noam Chomsky isn't someone who's going to go after Marvel for me putting manufacturing consent in a comic.
That's not a bad thing. If that's what you take out of it, getting a letter from Noam Chomsky.
Yeah.
Rita Carambola says, may I dare to ask about the two big lacunas in Longshot's story? Why did the Spiral hate him? What happened with Longshot, Rita, and Quark since they joined the guerrilla?
It's weird because people sometimes say that Spiral is Rita and she's not. It's like they're so completely different characters. One was engineered on Mojo World and does his bidding, and Ricochet Rita was a human who worked as a stunt woman in films. They have nothing to do with each other. They're completely different natures. But I think the confusion came because some writer came along later and suggested they were the same person. Me and Arthur were like, huh? No. But that's comics. That's work for hire. You create a bunch of characters. You don't own them. And I have always been somebody that's happy to throw my toys into the sandbox and let anyone play with them. It's in my nature. I remember when I took over Daredevil, there was you can never touch Elektra, out of respect to Frank. And there was this kind of verboten thing. You can't bring Elektra back. And I was like, okay, he felt a real personal attachment to that character. But I have never made such edicts. I've never said, no one can touch Spiral and your Rita and Typhoid. So people have played in the playpen with my toys, my and Arthur's toys, and my and Johnny's toys, and we're always just very happy about that. But I don't necessarily know who wrote these stories or why the two characters became mine. I don't know why.
Let me see. Rita Carambola, David Aja. Look, we have David Aja on the chat.
Hey, my pal.
It says, go buy the seeds on Ruby Falls. Yes, let's go buy the seeds on Ruby Falls, you guys. And he also tells you, also, there's no one as smart, lovely, kind, creative. Well, I love you.
Oh, well, he also knows we fought a lot, but somehow the third entity managed to rise above both of our bickering, The third entity, which was maybe combination of Karen Berger and something else. No, yeah, this was a blast. So, okay. Hi, David.
Let me see. What things do you remember? What things get you among the changes that were happening in Marvel by the end of the 80s made you decide that wasn't your place anymore?
I mean, I think I just got fired. Everybody got fired. I originally left. It's a very weird thing. I mean, I was the editor of the X-Men. They had just instituted editorial royalties to give us incentives to make our books sell like crazy. And I got my very first editor royalty check and quit. And literally, I would be so rich if I hadn't quit at that moment. But it was like, I wanted to write, I wanted to do journalism, I wanted to make film. And I said, this check, I could keep getting this check. And I love editing, I loved it. But I left at the kind of peak of my so-called career to do other things. And then I kept a hand in comics. But then I don't remember exactly when it was. It was like the early 90s. There was a collapse in the industry. And so many people lost work. And most famously, you can read a beautiful piece in the New York Times by Herb Trimpe and what he went through. Because I was young. I was a young, hungry girl looking to explore the world. But the old timers who had spent their lives inking, editing, writing, drawing. I mean, it was a lot more traumatizing because if you didn't have it, if you couldn't reinvent yourself, you were a little bit, So Herb Trimpe wrote this absolutely stunning essay about what it was like to be cut loose in that environment. So I would direct you to Google Herb Trimpe. I think it was the New York Times.
Yes, please. If you haven't, reading that is a must.
It really is. And his wife at the time, Linda Fite, was this known fact. She was the first woman to write a superhero for Marvel.
Nice.
Well, I think it was Hellcat, something like that. Anyway,
look for that too, guys. That's history. So if you didn't know that, that's a really important information that we just got from Annie. Let me see. Geraldo Borges asks you, will there be some extra materials on the Seeds trade paperback, like script pages, concept designs, and so on? Aside of my question, I love your work, and I'm eager to read the Seeds. And he says, oh, now I see that David Aja is also here. David, your work is awesome. So,
well, you could get David to answer that question. No, we both wrote little afterwards. I think mostly because the Seeds was written pre-Trump for me. A lot of things changed for Trump, and it was written everything. Like there's the barrier between the no drone zone, suddenly like the wall became a big deal. So there are a lot of things that changed because the politics of the United States changed, but there's also then a pandemic hit. And so there's a lot of stuff in the Seeds that's like, it's as if we're talking about fake news and a pandemic, and we're not, because it was all done before that. So we both afterwards to sort of say, please don't see this as a commentary on today. This was our imagined future written 4 years ago, or whenever it was. So I would have loved for David's thumbnails are hilarious. They're so squirmy and cute and funny and insane, and they've got like all these branches to them, and they're really, really fun. And then to see his process is amazing. So I was kind of disappointed that. And you can ask him. I think I have enough pages to add that, but hopefully he'll share that in some news article at some point.
Yeah. Or maybe Dark Horse will do another paperback, a hardcover, and include all of that. Let's hope.
For that to happen, you guys have to buy enough of it for it to.
We're telling you.
There is.
This is small, but it hurts.
Yeah, so, I'm gonna. I got a lot of hammers and drills.
There you go. Yours is a lot more. Yours is a lot more effective. So I'll just follow your lead, boss. Anyway.
And you know how evil Amazon is. I have no idea why, but The Seeds is only $14 on Amazon. It's $20 everywhere else, and it's only $14 on Amazon. So, as evil as
that's why there's a law in Spain that doesn't allow Amazon to do those things.
yeah,
We have a law that allows you can only do a 5% discount, any comic shop or any bookstore, nothing more than that. So Amazon is always trying to get publishers to give them a bigger discount to to compensate for what they can't do on the price of the books. And unfortunately, the publishers here are like, this is the law.
Yeah, and even though they're evil, I'm also telling you it's only $14 to buy our graphic novel on Amazon.
But yeah, that's the flip side of it. That's the flip side, guys. So, but if you can, please, don't buy it on Amazon.
It's easily $14 worth of entertainment.
It's a lot more than 14. Yeah.
Yes.
It's worth 30. And we want the hardcover. So you gotta push. You gotta help.
I think there's going to be one of the European editions will be hardcover.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, I think that David can tell me that, but I think that the Spanish edition, the Astiberri Spanish edition that is coming really soon is a hardcover. David, please correct me if I'm wrong. Let me see. The artist Javier Rodriguez. Hello, Javier says, I am here only to vindicate that New Mutants annual. I love it.
Oh, hi, Javier. I know Javier. I mean, I think I know these names from my Twitter and Facebook friends. Yeah.
Absolutely. Kale Robinson tells you, has being an editor affected your writing more positively, or caused a lot of second guessing that you feel gets in the way of a story? Is self-critique on an editorial level objectively possible?
Oh, you mean you're asking like one of those really deep questions about humanity and whether we know our own brains? Is that what he's asking?
I could just call the question is, being an editor has affected you as a writer. You question yourself too much because you were an editor, or it's like talking about apples and oranges.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true because as an editor, I think it's also like an experiential thing because especially these days, freelancers, we're all off in our little caves and, when you're an editor, there's so much going on. The office is so crazy. Your work's piling up and you have to constantly, as an editor, reassure everybody who's working for you that you have not forgotten about them, that you love them, because otherwise it's easy to get kind of lost in this weird paranoia of why are they calling me, Mm-hmm. And so I think that many levels and not just that level. Yes, the job of an editor it helps teach you how to be a better writer. How to let go of things, how to jettison stuff and roll with stuff,
Yeah, absolutely. So David answers, not having extras on the Seas was my decision, I think. I usually feel like to have those extras after reading a comic is like to have a making of projected after the film. He says, support local comic shops. I hate hardcovers. Soft cover with flaps for the wing.
Yeah, and I also think that in order to sell the book, because it's really important that we sell the book, the design of the American edition is very kind of, the back has a ton of writing on it, and David wanted something much simpler on the back. We made a decision that first we got to sell the thing, first we got to get it to be popular, but then we also talked about how the Spanish edition is all his. He can take all the chatter on the back cover off and all the bios, and it could just be pure. And I think that he'll have a chance to have the graphic novel come out exactly as he wanted to for the Spanish, for you guys, whereas the American version will always be a crass, second full of like, what do you call it? PR writing and all that stuff. So,
everybody gets his or her wish in the end. Let's hope.
Yeah.
Let's hope. You guys should be happy about that. David Aja, please let us have our hardcover with
Also,
making of.
I don't know if
We
you
love
can
you. We love you. Let us have it. What? Sorry.
somewhere up there. There's the Ruby Falls is up there, and it's absolutely beautiful. That they got Flavia to do a new cover, and it's a hardcover, and it's gorgeous.
Yes.
How do I? Yeah, it's beautiful. Yep. And it's just so maybe for the Italian edition, if he does the, I don't know how you say it, bow.
Bow. Yes, bow.
Yeah. And then he will also get to do, you know how Bow always does their dog?
Yep.
Why is it not going?
Lower, then to your left, and to your left. There you go. Perfect. So
he will be able to do the Bow dog as any character he wishes. It could be Lola or an alien or whatever he wants. Well, so looking forward to that.
I don't know. I don't know if Ruby Falls. Any publisher has purchased the rights to publish Ruby Falls in Spain yet? If anybody knows, tell me. But of course, since there's no Spanish edition yet, or I don't think it's been bought to publish here, buy the American edition, guys. Buy the American edition.
I don't think it's Ruby Falls. Like I said, we launched it during the pandemic at the beginning of and so it didn't really get any traction. And other than the Italian edition, because Flavia Biondi is Italian, I don't think none of the foreign rights have been gotten yet. And I'm pretty sure they can be gotten for cheap.
Okay, but guys, while that happens, don't kill my pitch, Annie. While that happens, while we have the possible Spanish edition, buy the American one. Buy the American one. We love you. Buy it. Okay. There you go. And see, David Aja says, the American edition is perfect. Buy it.
Oh, yeah. And I hear we don't have it yet. It's still on a slow boat from China, but I hear it smells really good.
I love the smell of fresh ink in the morning.
Yes.
Robert Duvall said napalm. I know, but napalm. But I prefer to say first thing in the morning. Anyway, it's been more than 2 hours, so you probably need to go back to your life. One last from me, and I let you go before you kill me. Is there any story that it's been in your head for many, many years, but you've been telling yourself, I am not ready, but you're going to tell it before you die or retire? I don't see you retiring, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right now, I would like to do the story about Haiti, because Haiti is a country that gave me a lot, and I want to return the favor. Haiti changed my life. All my students just impacted on me. So I'd like to do that story, but then, I'd like to do a story that's completely honest.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, each time I do a story, I turn myself inside out a little bit more. I share a little bit more, and I'll never be like Harvey P. Carr and literally giving people the inside of my brain. But I think that you have to get more and more and more honest. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think that I have a bunch of stories. I might go back to short stories, and also I draw. So my dream is really I do nails that aren't very good, but someday I'd like to draw a comic, my own comic, and it will be going back to those garage band days when the punk sensibility, you don't know how to play guitar or sing, but I was in a bunch of bands. I used to get up on stage and sing, and I could go back to those completely imposter syndrome moments when you're banging on a guitar, you don't know how to play, and make a comic.
Okay, so with that, thank you so much for being here, Annie.
Bye.
Please don't leave, because I want to say proper thank you to you after we cut the live feed. Okay. But again, to all of you, thank you so much. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you, the artists who came by,
Yes,
David
David,
Aja,
thank you,
Javier
David.
Rodriguez, Geraldo Borges, all of you. Thank you, Rita. I know you're there. I
Yes,
don't forget
Rita.
about you.
Yes, Javier.
And see you all tomorrow with the amazing Spanish illustrator, in Spanish, because it will be in Spanish, con la maravillosa ilustradora española, Ana Galvañe. Sí, con ñ al final. Nos vemos todos. Thank you, Annie, again. And we're off in 3,